They looked at her skin and saw a trespasser. They should have looked at her wrist and seen the apocalypse. When Nia Sterling, the silent architect behind a trillion-dollar fintech empire, was told she didn't look like a first-class passenger, she didn't scream. She didn't fight. She simply unlocked her phone. In a world where money talks, Nia Sterling doesn't speak, she executes. Watch carefully, because in the next 5 minutes, an arrogant billionaire is going to lose $900 million at 30,000 feet, and he won't even see the bullet coming until his credit card declines. This is what happens when you disrespect the wrong CEO. The air inside the private first-class lounge at JFK Terminal 4 smelled of espresso-expensive leather and that specific, sterile silence that only money can buy. It was a sanctuary for the elite, a place where the noise of the general public was filtered out by frosted glass and attentive concierges. Nia Sterling stood near the entrance, adjusting the cuff of her cream-colored Loro Piana cashmere coat. She wasn't carrying a flashy Birkin or dragging a Louis Vuitton trunk plastered with logos. Her luggage was a sleek, matte black aluminum carry-on, by Rimowa scuffed just enough to show it traveled often. At 34, Nia was a striking figure, tall with deep mahogany skin and hair pulled back into an uncompromisingly sharp bun. She possessed a stillness that unnerved people, the kind of calm found in the eye of a hurricane. She approached the polished mahogany desk, where a concierge named Sharon was aggressively typing on a keyboard. Sharon didn't look up. She was a woman in her 50s with stiff blonde hair and a permanent expression of mild annoyance. "Excuse me," Nia said, her voice a low, smooth contralto. "Checking in for Flight 109 to Zurich." Sharon finished her sentence on the screen before slowly raising her eyes. Her gaze raked over Nia, lingering on the lack of visible designer logos, then flicked to the queue of businessmen behind her. "The business lounge is down the hall to the left," Sharon said, her voice dripping with a practiced, sugary condescension. "This is the flagship first lounge. It requires a specific ticket code or a Centurion black card." Nia didn't blink. She was used to this dance. It was the invisible wall, the assumption that she was lost staff, or lucky. "I'm aware," Nia replied, sliding her passport and boarding pass across the marble counter. "I'm in seat 1A. Sharon let out a short, scoffing breath, almost a laugh. She picked up the boarding pass with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. She scanned it, her eyebrows raising high as the screen beeped green. She frowned, typing furiously again. "There seems to be a discrepancy," Sharon muttered. "The system shows 1A is occupied." "It is," Nia said. "By me." "No, I mean physically," Sharon said, her tone hardening. "Mr. Preston van der Hoven checked in 10 minutes ago. He is a Global Services member and a Diamond Medallion holder. The system must have double-booked the seat, and frankly, Mr. van der Hoven has priority status." Nia felt the temperature in her blood drop, but her pulse remained steady. Preston van der Hoven, the name was familiar. Old money, real estate heir, the kind of man who thought the world was paved specifically for his Italian loafers. "I purchased this ticket full fare 3 weeks ago," Nia said, leaning in slightly. "I am not interested in Mr. van der Hoven's medallion status. I have a meeting in Zurich with the heads of the Swiss National Bank in 8 hours. I need the workspace in 1A. Fix it." Sharon bristled. The queue behind Nia was growing restless. A man in a grey suit sighed loudly. "Miss Sterling." Sharon read the name like it was a typo. "I can move you to business class. We can offer you a $500 voucher for the inconvenience. But I cannot move Mr. van der Hoven. He is, well, he's a very important client. And I am a passenger with a valid contract of carriage." Nia said, her voice turning to steel. "Do not downgrade me." "It's the best I can do," Sharon snapped, handing the passport back without making eye contact. "Please step aside. You're holding up the line for the actual frequent flyers." Nia took her passport. She didn't yell. She didn't demand a manager. She knew exactly how this game was played. If she made a scene, security would be called, and she would be labeled the angry black woman and removed from the flight entirely. She needed to be on this plane. "Fine," Nia said softly. "I'll handle it on board." Sharon rolled her eyes. "Good luck with that." The cabin of the Boeing 737-300ER was a marvel of modern luxury. The first-class suites were individual pods, with sliding doors, lay-flat beds, and massive entertainment screens. The lighting was dim and amber-designed to soothe. Nia walked down the jet bridge, her heart hammering a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs. She boarded the plane, greeted by the lead flight attendant, a woman named Beatrice, who wore a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome aboard, Miss Sterling. Seat 1A. Beatrice's smile faltered. "Ah, yes." The gate agent called down. "We have a bit of a situation." "There is no situation," Nia said, walking past her. "I have a ticket." She turned left into the first-class cabin. And there he was. Preston van der Hoven looked exactly like his press photos, only redder in the face. He was a large man, taking up a significant portion of the suite. He was wearing a bespoke navy suit, the jacket discarded carelessly on the ottoman. He was already sipping a glass of Dom Perignon, laughing loudly into his cell phone. "I told the board to shove it, Jerry. If the liquidity isn't there by noon, we dissolve the merger. I don't care about the SEC filings." Nia stepped into the entrance of the suite. "Excuse me." Preston ignored her, taking a gulp of champagne. Yeah, hold on. Some stewardess is hovering." He lowered the phone and looked at Nia, his eyes glazed with arrogance and alcohol. "I don't need a refill, sweetheart, but you can take this jacket and hang it up." He gestured to his suit jacket with a flick of his wrist. Nia stood her ground, her posture perfect. "I am not a flight attendant, Mr. van der Hoven. You are in my seat." Preston blinked, processing the information slowly. Then a smirk spread across his face, a nasty proprietary look. "Your seat, I don't think so. I'm Preston van der Hoven. I own this seat. I practically own this airline." "You are double booked," Nia corrected him. "And I have the original confirmation. Please move to your assigned overflow seat so we can depart." Preston laughed, a barking sound that made the other 3 passengers in first class look up. "Did you hear that, Jerry? This girl thinks she's kicking me out of 1A. "Listen, honey," he said, dropping the phone to his lap. "I don't know who you slept with to get a ticket up front, but this is the grown-ups table. There's a nice seat back in row 40 near the toilets. Go find it." Beatrice, the flight attendant, rushed over. She positioned herself between Nia and Preston, her back to Preston, facing Nia. "Miss Sterling," Beatrice hissed, "you are causing a disturbance. I need you to lower your voice." "I haven't raised my voice," Nia said calmly. "He is verbally abusing me and refuses to vacate the seat I paid for." "Mr. van der Hoven is a priority partner," Beatrice said, her voice tight. "We have accommodated you in seat 4B. It's in business. It's very comfortable. Please take your seat there, or I will have to ask the pilot to return to the gate and have you escorted off by federal marshals." The threat hung in the air. Federal marshals. For trying to sit in her own seat. Nia looked at Preston. He was grinning, holding his glass up in a mock toast. "Bye-bye, princess," he mouthed. Nia looked at Beatrice, whose face was set in stone. The injustice of it wasn't new, but the scale of it was sharp. It was the audacity, the absolute certainty that they could treat her like refuse because they didn't recognize her value. They saw a woman of color and assumed powerless. They were wrong. "You're forcing me to move?" Nia asked Beatrice, her voice quiet. "This is your official stance. You are denying me the service I paid for to accommodate his preference." "I am ordering you to take your assigned seat in business or get off the plane," Beatrice said. Final warning. "Very well," Nia said. She didn't storm off. She didn't cry. She simply turned around, walked 4 rows back, and sat in seat 4B. It was a nice seat. But it wasn't the one she paid for, and it wasn't the principal. She pulled out her phone. The plane was still at the gate. The doors were open. She had signal. Nia unlocked her phone. She bypassed her contacts and opened a secure encrypted app used by the top 1% of global finance, a direct line to the market makers. She dialed a number that didn't have a name, just a 10-digit code. It rang once. "Sterling," a male voice answered immediately, crisp British and sounding alert. "We weren't expecting a check-in until you landed in Zurich. Is everything all right?" "No, Arthur," Nia said, staring at the back of Preston van der Hoven's head through the gap in the curtain. "I'm currently on Flight 109. I've been involuntarily downgraded to accommodate a Preston van der Hoven. He was belligerent. The crew is enabling it." There was a silence on the other end. A dangerous silence. Arthur wasn't just an assistant. He was the chief of operations for Sterling Vanguard, Nia's private equity firm, a firm that specialized in high-risk corporate debt. "Preston van der Hoven," Arthur repeated, "CEO of Van der Hoven Real Estate Trust." "The very same," Nia said. "He's currently on the phone, loudly discussing a liquidity merger due by noon today. He seems to think he owns the airline. Arthur, do we have exposure on him?" Nia heard the rapid clatter of a keyboard. "Pulling his file now. Yes. We don't hold his primary debt, but... Oh, this is interesting. His merger relies on a bridge loan from Centurion Capital. He needs $900 million to close the deal with the Swiss group by 12 Euro PM EST. If the funds don't transfer, the deal collapses and his stock shorts." Nia's eyes narrowed. Centurion Capital. That's a subsidiary of BlackRock, isn't it? "Technically," Arthur said, "but the underwriting risk is insured by Vanguard Re. That's us, Nia. We are the guarantors of his bridge loan." A small cold smile touched Nia's lips. "So effectively, I am the one lending him the money he's using to fly first class. Effectively, yes, you own his debt." "Arthur," Nia said, leaning back in the business class seat, "initiate a risk assessment review on the Van der Hoven account. Immediately. Cite erratic CEO behavior and potential reputation damage. Freeze the bridge loan." "Nia," Arthur hesitated. "If we freeze the bridge loan, now the wire transfer to the Swiss bank will fail. He'll default on the merger. The penalty clauses, he'll lose the acquisition deposit. That's roughly 50 million in cash, and the stock drop will wipe out nearly $1 billion in market cap. This is a nuclear option." "He told me to go sit by the toilets, Arthur," Nia said softly. "Understood," Arthur said, his tone shifting to professional efficiency. "Freezing the assets now. I'll also flag his corporate credit cards for suspicious activity just to be thorough. The freeze will hit the SWIFT network in 3 minutes. "Thank you, Arthur. Keep me on the line." Nia placed the phone on her lap. She looked at her watch. Minute 1. The flight attendant Beatrice walked by Nia with a hot towel, pointedly ignoring her. In the front, Preston was laughing. "Champagne's flowing, Jerry. We're closing in 2 hours. I'm going to be the king of Zurich." Minute 2. The pilot came over the intercom. "Folks, we're just waiting for some final paperwork on the cargo load. Then we'll be pushing back. Sit tight." Minute 3. Naya watched Preston. He was holding his phone to his ear, his brow furrowing. "Hello, Jerry. You're breaking up. What do you mean, declined?" Nia put her earbuds in, but she didn't turn on any music. She just activated the transparency mode so she could hear everything amplified. "Don't be an idiot, Jerry." Preston shouted, his voice carrying through the cabin. "It's a 9-figure account. Run it again. What do you mean the compliance officer froze it?" Beatrice rushed to seat 1A. "Mr. Vanderhoven, please, you need to lower your voice." "Shut up!" Preston snapped at the woman who had just defended him. "My CFO is telling me the wire transfer is blocked. I need Wi-Fi. Turn the damn Wi-Fi on now." "Sir, we are on the ground. Wi-Fi doesn't engage until 10,000 feet, Beatrice stammered. "Then open the door," Preston screamed, standing up. "I need to make a secure call. My Amex isn't working." Preston scrambled to grab his jacket. He pulled out a sleek black card, the Centurion card, and waved it at his phone, as if that would help. Jerry put the chairman on, put the bank. Chairman on who authorized a freeze. Naya sat in seat 4B, calmly opening a magazine. She tapped her phone screen once. Arthur was still on the line. "The freeze is confirmed, Naya. His liquidity is 0. The Swiss bank just sent a notification of payment failure. The deal is dead." The first-class cabin, usually a sanctuary of hushed tones and clinking crystal, had devolved into a war room. The plane was still parked at the gate, the engines humming a low, idle whine that vibrated through the floorboards. Preston Vanderhoven was no longer sitting. He was pacing the short length of the aisle between the cockpit door and the galley, his face a mottled map of rage and panic. "What do you mean, compliance audit?" Preston roared into his phone, spittle flying onto the mahogany partition of Suite 1A. "Jerry, I have been with that bank for 20 years. I play golf with the regional director, unfreeze the accounts." Naya watched from seat 4B. She had adjusted her seat into a slight recline, looking for all the world like a woman bored by a delay. But inside, she was conducting a symphony of destruction. Arthur's voice came through her earpiece, calm and clinical. "Update Naya. The freeze on the bridge loan triggered a terrifying domino effect. Because the $900 million didn't post by the 12:00 p.m. deadline, the Swiss sellers invoked the bad faith clause. They've not only pulled the deal, but they've also issued a press release stating that Vanderhoven Trust failed to prove solvency." "And the market reaction?" Nia whispered, barely moving her lips. "Catastrophic," Arthur replied. "Algorithms picked up the press release instantly. Vanderhoven's stock is down 14% in pre-market trading. It's bleeding out. His board of directors has called an emergency vote of no confidence. They're trying to reach him, but he's screaming at his assistant instead of answering the board." Naya finished. "Precisely." In the aisle, Preston was unraveling. He grabbed Beatrice, the flight attendant, who had sneered at Naya earlier. Beatrice looked terrified now. The man she had protected was turning into a monster. "You!" Preston barked, grabbing her arm. "I need a landline. Does this cockpit have a satellite phone? My cell signal is garbage. Sir, please unhand me." Beatrice stammered, her professional veneer cracking. "You cannot enter the cockpit. The pilots are pre-flight." "Do you know how much money I am losing every second this plane sits here?" Preston screamed. He fumbled for his wallet, his hand shaking so hard he dropped a platinum credit card on the floor. He didn't pick it up. He pulled out another card, a heavy black titanium card from a private wealth bank. "Run this!" he shouted, shoving it at Beatrice. "I want to buy the Wi-Fi for the whole plane. I want the satellite uplink. Charge me 10,000, I don't care. Just get me a connection." Beatrice, trembling, took the card. She moved to the mobile payment terminal, mounted on the galley wall. She swiped it. Beep, beep, beep. A red light flashed. Declined. Issuer referral. "It didn't go through, sir," Beatrice whispered. "Try it again." Preston howled. "It has a $5 million limit." Beatrice swiped again. "Declined. Card reported. Stolen. Frozen." "It says it's frozen, sir." Preston froze. The colour drained from his face, leaving him a sickly, sweat-drenched grey. He looked at his phone. He had 5 missed calls from board chair McKinnon. He dialed McKinnon back, putting it on speaker in his panic. "McKinnon, fix this. The bank is—" The voice on the other end was icy cold. "Preston, shut up. You've triggered a liquidity crisis. The SEC just flagged our accounts for possible fraud because the bridge loan guarantor pulled the plug, citing criminal negligence. Who did you piss off, Preston, who is Sterling Vanguard?" Nia, sitting 4 rows back, turned the page of her magazine. Sterling Vanguard, her company. Preston stared at the phone. "Sterling. I don't know a Sterling. It's a mistake. Tell them it's a glitch." "It's not a glitch," McKinnon said. "We're invoking the morality clause in your contract. You're suspended as CEO effective immediately pending an investigation. Don't go to Zurich, Preston. Come to the office. If you leave the country, it looks like fleeing prosecution." The line went dead. Preston van der Hoven dropped his phone. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. He stood there, a man who had walked onto the plane, a king, and was now, 5 minutes later, a pauper facing an indictment. The silence following Preston's call was deafening. The other passengers in first class were staring mouths open. They had just witnessed the real-time destruction of a Titan. But the humiliation wasn't over. The cockpit door unlatched with a heavy mechanical click. Captain Miller, a silver-haired veteran pilot with 4 stripes on his shoulders, stepped out. He didn't look happy. He held a manifest printed on thermal paper in his hand. Beatrice rushed to him. "Captain, I'm so sorry Mr. van der Hoven is having a medical or a financial episode. We might need security." Captain Miller ignored Beatrice entirely. He ignored Preston, who was leaning against the wall hyperventilating. The captain walked past row 1. He walked past row 2. He walked past row 3. He stopped at row 4 business class. He looked at the number, then down at the woman sitting in seat 4B. Neuer looked up, her expression serene. "Ms. Neuer Sterling," the captain asked, his voice respectful and grave. "Yes, Captain," Neuer said. Captain Miller took off his hat. "Ma'am, I just received a text via ACARS from our Operations Control Center in Atlanta. They informed me that there is a Category 1 VIP on board who was involuntarily downgraded." Beatrice, who had followed the captain, gasped. "Captain, I handled the seating. Ms. Sterling didn't have status. Mr. van der Hoven is a diamond medallion." The captain turned on Beatrice, his eyes blazing. "Beatrice, Ms. Sterling isn't a frequent flyer. She is the CEO of Sterling Vanguard. Do you know who that is?" Beatrice shook her head, pale. "They are the majority shareholder of the aircraft leasing consortium that owns this specific Boeing 737. Captain Miller said, his voice hard. "She doesn't just buy a ticket, Beatrice. She effectively owns the plane." The air left the cabin. Beatrice looked at Nia, her eyes wide with horror. She had treated the owner of the fleet like a stowaway. Captain Miller turned back to Nia. "Ms. Sterling, on behalf of the airline, I am mortified. Control has instructed me to rectify this immediately. We cannot take off until you are seated in your purchased seat 1A. Furthermore, the CEO of the airline is currently on hold on the sat phone for you, if you wish to speak with him." Nia stood up slowly. She smoothed her cashmere coat. "Thank you, Captain," Nia said. "I don't need to speak to your CEO right now. I just want the seat I paid for." She looked toward the front of the plane, but it seems to be occupied by a man who is no longer a CEO. The silence that descended upon the first-class cabin wasn't empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and electric. It was the kind of silence that follows a gunshot in a crowded room. The ambient hum of the Boeing 777's auxiliary power unit seemed to fade into the background, drowned out by the collective holding of breath from the 5 other passengers in the premium cabin. Preston van der Hoven stood frozen near the galley, his back pressed against the polished walnut veneer of the bulkhead. His chest heaved in rapid, shallow gasps. His face, previously flushed with the arrogance of expensive scotch and uncheckered power, had drained to the color of wet ash. In his hand, his phone vibrated a relentless buzzing insect. It wasn't a call, it was a cascade of notifications. Ding, ding, ding. He looked down, his vision swimming. Alert Amex Centurion. Account closed. Alert Chase. Private client. Assets frozen by compliance. Email Board of Directors. Notice of emergency suspension. Text from wife. Preston, why are the cards declining at the tuition office? Call me. His entire life, meticulously constructed on leverage credit and the assumption of immunity, was disintegrating in real time, and the architect of his destruction was walking toward him. Nia Sterling did not rush. She moved with the fluid, predatory grace of a panther stalking wounded prey. The soft click of her heels on the carpeted aisle was the only sound in the plane. She stopped exactly 4 feet from him, close enough to see the sweat beading on his upper lip, but far enough to maintain the sanitary distance one keeps from something contagious. Captain Miller stood beside her, his posture rigid, his face carved from stone. He was no longer just a pilot. He was the ultimate authority on this vessel, and he had chosen his side. Preston's eyes darted from the captain to Nia. His brain was misfiring, struggling to reconcile the image of the woman he had dismissed as a nobody with the entity that had just nuked his financial existence. You, Preston croaked his voice, cracking like dry wood. You're doing this. You're the one. I am, Nia replied. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. It wasn't the voice of an angry passenger. It was the voice of a judge delivering a verdict. I am the discrepancy you were so concerned about. Preston pushed himself off the wall, a flash of his old aggression returning. You think this is funny? You think you can just press a button and destroy a merger? I'm Preston van der Hoven. I have lawyers who will eat you alive. I will sue you for tortious interference. I will sue this airline for every rivet in this fuselage. Mr. van der Hoven, that is enough, Captain Miller barked, stepping forward. No, Captain, Nia said, raising a hand gently to stop him. She didn't break eye contact with Preston. Let him speak. It's important for the record. She took a half-step closer, her dark eyes boring into his. You seem confused, Preston. Let me clarify the situation for you. You didn't lose your funding because I was angry. You lost it because you proved yourself to be a liability. A liability? Preston spat, spittle flying. I run $1 billion trust. You ran a trust, Nia corrected, emphasizing the past tense. I watched you for 10 minutes. In that time, you verbally assaulted a crew member, publicly disclosed sensitive insider information regarding a merger on an insecure line, and displayed a complete lack of emotional control when faced with a minor logistical hurdle. My firm, Sterling Vanguard, guarantees your bridge loans. We underwrite the risk. And when I saw you screaming at a flight attendant over a seat assignment, I realized something. If you can't manage your temper in first class, you certainly can't manage a $900 million acquisition in Zurich. The passengers in seats 2A and 2F were now openly watching, some even holding up their phones to record. Preston looked around, realizing he was on stage. You can't do this, he whispered at the fight beginning to drain out of him as the reality set in. The deal, The Swiss deal. It's my legacy. Your legacy was leveraged debt, Naya said coldly, and I just called the note. She turned her attention to the captain. The shift in her demeanor was instant, from executioner to concerned passenger. Captain Miller. Nia said, her voice distinct and clear. I am formally stating that I do not feel safe traveling with this individual. He has displayed erratic, aggressive behavior. He has threatened the crew. And given that he has just received news of a catastrophic financial collapse, I believe he presents a significant security risk. A desperate man at 30,000 feet is a danger to everyone on board. Beatrice, the flight attendant who had previously tried to banish Naya to row 4, saw her opening. She knew which way the wind was blowing. She needed to save her own skin. I second that, Captain, Beatrice said, her voice trembling but audible. She stepped out from the galley. Mr. van der Hoven grabbed my arm earlier. He was physically intimidating and refused to follow crew instructions. I am afraid to serve him. Preston spun around, his eyes bulging. You traitor, I was the one protecting you. I gave you a tip. You threw money at me, Beatrice said, clutching her tablet to her chest. There's a difference. Captain Miller nodded firmly. That's all I need to hear. Mr. van der Hoven, pursuant to federal aviation regulations, I am declaring you unfit for transport. You are being removed from this flight immediately. I'm not going anywhere, Preston shouted, backing up until he hit the cockpit door. I paid $12,000 for this ticket. I have rights. I'm a Diamond Medallion member. Your status is irrelevant, Captain Miller said. He unclipped the radio from his shoulder. Tower Flight 109, requesting immediate law enforcement assistance at the gate. We have a non-compliant passenger refusing to deplane. Send the port authority. Copy that, 109. Police are en route. The next 3 minutes were the longest of Preston's life. He stood cornered, breathing heavily, while the entire first-class cabin watched him with a mixture of pity and disgust. He looked at his phone again. Another email. From General Counsel. Subject resignation. Message Preston. I can't represent you in the SEC probe. I'm resigning effective immediately. He slumped. The fight went out of his legs. 2 heavy thuds on the jet bridge floor announced the arrival of the authorities. The cabin door, which had remained open, was filled by 2 massive officers from the Port Authority Police Department. They weren't smiling. They weren't impressed by suits. They saw a disturbance, and their job was to remove it. Which one? The lead officer asked, scanning the room. Captain Miller pointed a finger at Preston. That gentleman. He's been aggressive, abusive to the crew, and is refusing to leave the aircraft. The officer walked up to Preston. Sir, grab your bags. You're coming with us. You don't understand. Preston pleaded, his voice reducing to a whine. She did this, that woman. She hacked my bank accounts. He pointed a shaking finger at Nia. The officer didn't even look at Nia. Sir, that's a civil matter. Right now you're trespassing on a federal aircraft. Let's go. When Preston didn't move, the officer grabbed his arm. It wasn't a gentle guide. It was a firm, masterful grip that utilized pressure points. Preston yelped. Get your hands off me! Preston shrieked, flailing. He tried to twist away, kicking out his leg and striking the side of the pod in seat 1A. That's assault and resisting, the officer said flatly. Turn around. In a blur of motion, Preston was spun around and slammed chest first against the galley wall. The sound of metal cuffs ratcheting shut echoed through the silent cabin. Click, click, click. You are making a mistake, Preston howled as they hauled him upright. I'll have your badges. I'll buy this airport and turn it into a parking lot. Yeah, tell it to the judge, buddy, the second officer said, grabbing Preston's other arm. They began to drag him down the aisle. It was a humiliating, clumsy procession. Preston's expensive Italian loafers dragged on the carpet. His suit jacket was bunched up around his shoulders. He looked like a child throwing a tantrum stripped of all dignity. As they passed, Nia Preston dug his heels in. He stopped panting, his eyes wild and rimmed with red. He looked at the woman he had sent to the back of the plane. "Who are you?" He whispered a question, born of genuine, terrifying confusion. "What are you?" Nia didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply leaned in, her voice soft enough that only he could hear it, intimate and devastating. "I'm the person you should have been nice to," she said. "Enjoy the middle seat in holding." The officers shoved him forward. "Move it." Preston van der Hoven was hauled off the plane, his shouts echoing down the jet bridge until the heavy acoustic door was slammed shut by the gate agent, sealing the noise out. The silence returned to the cabin, but it was different now. The tension had broken, replaced by a sense of awe. Beatrice stood by the galley, shaking. She looked at Nia with a mixture of fear and reverence. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron and rushed to seat 1A, the seat Preston had warmed, the seat that had caused a war. I will change the bedding immediately, Ms. Sterling," Beatrice stammered. "I'll sanitize everything. It will just take a moment." "Take your time, Beatrice," Nia said gently. Nia turned to the other passengers. A man in 2A, a hedge fund manager who had recognized the Sterling name halfway through the conflict, gave her a slow, respectful nod. He knew what had just happened. The predator had eaten. Nia walked to seat 1A. She watched Beatrice strip the linens with frantic speed, replacing them with crisp, fresh sheets. The taint of Preston van der Hoven was being scrubbed away. Nia sat down. The seat was comfortable. It felt right. She pulled her laptop from her bag and opened it. The screen illuminated her face. She had one notification from Arthur. Market update. Van der Hoven Real Estate Trust stock has plummeted 22% in pre-market. Trading halted. The board is panic selling assets to cover the liquidity gap. The Manhattan portfolio is available. Asking price is 30 cents on the dollar. Nia's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Preston had told her to find a seat by the toilets. Instead, she was about to buy the building he lived in. She typed a reply, "Execute the buy order. Full acquisition." She hit enter just as the engines roared to life, the vibrations humming through the soles of her feet. The plane began to push back. Nia Sterling looked out the window at the JFK tarmac, watching the flashing lights of the police cruiser taking Preston away. She adjusted her seat to the lie-flat position. It was going to be a very pleasant flight. The descent into Zurich was a study in serenity. The Boeing 737-300ER, the very vessel that had been a battlefield only hours prior, now glided through the Swiss dawn like a silver needle stitching the sky. Inside the cabin, the silence was absolute. It was the silence of a kingdom after the usurper has been exiled. Nia Sterling lay awake in seat 1A. She hadn't slept, not because she couldn't, but because she was working. The blue light of her laptop illuminated her face, reflecting in her dark eyes. On her screen, a complex web of financial data shifted in real time. The acquisition of the Van der Hoven Real Estate Trust was no longer just a plan. It was a digital reality being written into the blockchain of the global market. Every time the plane banked, she bought another percentage of his life's work. As the wheels kissed the tarmac with a gentle thud, the cabin light slowly brightened to a soft, waking amber. Beatrice, the flight attendant, emerged from the galley. She looked different. The stiff, sneering posture she had worn in New York was gone, replaced by the trembling, hyper-vigilant solicitousness of someone who knows they are walking on a razor's edge. Beatrice approached seat 1A, holding a hot towel with shaking tongs. "Ms. Sterling." Beatrice whispered, her voice barely audible. "We have arrived. The station manager has arranged for a private stair car, so you won't have to walk through the terminal. Nia accepted the towel, wiping her hands slowly. She looked up at Beatrice. The woman's eyes were rimmed with red. She had clearly been crying in the galley during the flight. "Beatrice," Nia said. The name hung in the air. "Yes, ma'am." Beatrice flinched. "You are excellent at your job when you are afraid." Nia observed her tone, devoid of malice but heavy with truth. "It is a pity you require fear to find your manners. Compassion costs nothing but prejudice. That is a very expensive luxury. I trust you've learned that today." "I have—" Beatrice choked out, tears spilling over. "I truly have." "Good. Then you keep your wings. For now." Nia stood up, grabbed her sleek black Rimowa bag, and walked to the cabin door. The cool, crisp air of the Alps hit her face, a stark contrast to the stale, recycled air of the cabin. At the bottom of the stairs, a fleet of black Mercedes sedans waited on the tarmac engines idling. A man in an immaculately tailored charcoal suit stood by the lead car. It was Heinrich Vogel, chairman of the Swiss consortium. He didn't just shake her hand, he bowed his head. "Nia," Heinrich said, opening the car door for her. "I expected you to be tired. You look like you just won a war." "I didn't win a war, Heinrich," Nia said, sliding into the leather interior of the Maybach. "I just evicted a tenant." As the motorcade swept out of the airport and toward the banking district of Zurich, Heinrich handed her a thick leather folio. "The contracts," Heinrich said. Van der Hoeven's board panicked at 4:00 a.m. New York time. When the SEC freeze hit their stock entered freefall, they triggered the emergency liquidation clause to save the shareholders. You picked up his Manhattan portfolio, including the building he lives in, for 30 cents on the dollar. Nia opened the file. There it was, the deed to the penthouse at 432 Park Avenue, Preston's home. He built that tower to look down on everyone, Nia murmured, signing the document with a flourish. Now he's going to learn what it feels like to be on the sidewalk looking up. Meanwhile, 3,900 miles away, Queens, New York, the holding cell at the Port Authority police station in JFK Terminal 4 didn't smell like the Swiss Alps. It smelled of industrial bleach, dried vomit, and the sour metallic tang of unwashed bodies. Preston van der Hoeven sat on a cold steel bench bolted to the concrete floor. His bespoke Italian suit, worth $6,000, was wrinkled and stained. His tie had been confiscated as a suicide risk. His shoelaces were gone, leaving the tongues of his loafers flapping open like dead fish. He had been sitting there for 6 hours. No phone, no assistant, no water. Just the buzzing of a fluorescent light that flickered incessantly, drilling a headache into his skull. The heavy steel door clanked open. Preston leaped to his feet. "About time," he croaked, his throat parched. "Where is my lawyer? Where is Baker and McKenzie? I want to sue this entire precinct for false imprisonment." A woman walked in. She was not from a white shoe law firm. She was wearing a mismatched pantsuit, carried a battered briefcase, and looked like she hadn't slept in a week. She dropped a file onto the metal table with a heavy thud. "Sit down, Mr. van der Hoeven," she said, not looking at him. "Who are you?" Preston demanded. "I asked for the senior partner at Skadden." "And they declined the call," she said, finally looking at him with eyes that had seen too many men like him. "My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm a public defender. I've been assigned to your arraignment because you, sir, are currently indigent." "Indigent?" Preston laughed, a manic, high-pitched sound. "I am a billionaire. I have 300 million in liquid assets." Sarah opened the file and slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout from the Department of Justice. "Notice of asset forfeiture and freeze," she read aloud. Due to the flagrant nature of your insider trading admission on a public aircraft, combined with the bad faith default on the Swiss bridge loan, the SEC and the DOJ have frozen everything. Your personal accounts, your trust, your offshore holdings. It's all locked down pending a federal fraud investigation. Preston stared at the paper. The words swam before his eyes. Frozen. Criminal investigation. Default. But my wife, Preston stammered. Linda. She can bond me out. Sarah sighed, a sound of pity mixed with exhaustion. Your wife's attorney contacted the precinct an hour ago. She has filed for emergency divorce and secured a temporary restraining order. She's claiming you endangered the family fortune through gross negligence. She's not posting bail, Preston. She's changing the locks. Preston slowly sank back onto the bench. The cold steel seeped through his trousers. The reality hit him, not like a wave, but like a landslide. The silence in the room was deafening. This is impossible, he whispered, his hands shaking violently. All I did was tell her to move seats. She was nobody. She didn't look like she belonged there. That nobody, Sarah said, packing up her briefcase, was the guarantor of your loans. You judged a book by its cover, Preston, and it turns out that book was the one writing your checks. We go before the judge in 20 minutes. I suggest you plead no contest to the assault charge. If you fight it, the DA will bury you. She walked to the door and knocked for the guard. Oh, Sarah added, pausing in the doorway. One more thing. The judge presiding over your arraignment, Judge Marcus. He's a stickler for respect. I'd advise you not to scream at him. He doesn't care about your diamond medallion status. The door slammed shut. Preston was alone again. He looked at his hands, soft, manicured hands that had never done a day of hard labor. They were trembling. For the first time in 40 years, Preston van der Hoven was small. 3 months later, the Plaza Hotel Manhattan. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a kaleidoscope of diamond, silk, and camera flashes. It was the annual gala for the Sterling Foundation, the most coveted ticket in New York City. The air smelled of expensive perfume and success. Nia Sterling stood at the podium, bathed in a spotlight that made her gold gown shimmer like liquid metal. She looked regal, untouchable. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the Foundation's new initiative, the Open Door Project, a scholarship and venture capital fund for entrepreneurs from marginalized communities. She leaned into the microphone. The room filled with senators, tech moguls, and captains of industry went silent. For too long, Nia's voice rang out clear and powerful. Access to capital has been determined by the zip code you were born in, or the color of your skin, or the cut of your coat. We have allowed gatekeepers to decide who gets to walk through the door of opportunity. She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. I met a gatekeeper recently. She continued, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. He thought that because he stood in the doorway, he owned the room. He forgot that the room is owned by those who build it, not those who block it. Tonight we are tearing down the gates. We are building a table where everyone has a seat, provided they know how to behave. The room erupted in applause, a standing ovation. Nia stepped down from the stage, flanked by Arthur and her security team. She moved through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. She felt light. The weight of the past few months, the acquisition, the restructuring of Preston's old company, the endless board meetings had lifted. Ms. Sterling, Arthur said, checking his watch. The jet is fueled for Tokyo. We need to leave now if we want to make the opening bell. Let's go, Nia said. They exited the ballroom and walked out into the cool night air of Central Park South. The city was alive, the energy of New York vibrating in the pavement. The valet stand was a flurry of activity, with Bentleys and Rolls-Royces lined up 3 deep. The valet captain, a man Naya knew well, rushed over. "Miss Sterling, your car is next. I'll have a runner bring it around immediately." He snapped his fingers at a figure standing in the shadows near the key box. "Hey, new guy, move it the Maybach. Don't scratch it, or you're done." The runner jogged out of the shadows. He was moving with a slight limp, his head bowed low against the wind. He wore a cheap, ill-fitting polyester uniform with a generic valet logo stitched on the chest. He looked older than his years. His hair, once dyed a youthful chestnut, was now grey and thinning. His face was gaunt, the skin hanging loosely on his cheekbones, the mark of stress and sleepless nights. He reached the car, his hands fumbling slightly with the keys. He opened the rear door and stood at attention, keeping his eyes fixed firmly on the pavement, afraid to look the wealthy patrons in the eye. "Your car, ma'am," he mumbled, his voice raspy. Nia stopped. She recognized the cadence of that voice. It was a voice that had once shouted at her to find a seat by the toilets. She stood by the open door, motionless. The silence stretched. "Look at me," Nia said softly. The valet froze. His shoulders stiffened. Slowly, painfully, he raised his head. Preston van der Hoven looked into the eyes of Nia Sterling. The recognition hit him like a physical blow. His jaw dropped slightly, his eyes widening in horror and humiliation. He looked at her, radiant, powerful, the owner of the world. Then he looked down at himself, a servant in a polyester vest, working for minimum wage, plus tips. Miss Sterling," Preston whispered. The arrogance was dead. The fire was gone. All that was left was a pile of ash. "Preston," Nia said. Her tone wasn't mocking. It wasn't angry. It was almost pitying. "I see you found a job. Probation." Preston choked out tears welling in his eyes. I lost everything. The restitution payments, the lawyers. This is the only place that would hire me with a fraud record. I park the cars I used to own." He looked at the Maybach. It was the same model he used to be chauffeured in. Now he was just the guy holding the door. He gripped the handle tighter, his knuckles white. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words barely escaping his lips. "I didn't know." "That was your crime, Preston," Nia said. "Not that you didn't know who I was, but that you didn't think it mattered who anyone was unless they could do something for you." Nia reached into her clutch. She didn't pull out a phone to record him. She didn't insult him. She pulled out a crisp, fresh $100 bill. She held it out. Preston stared at the money. It was the exact amount he had thrown at Beatrice, the tip he had used as a weapon to demean her. Now it was being offered to him as charity. His hand shook as he reached out. He took the bill. It felt heavy in his palm. "Keep the change," Nia said. And Preston. He looked up, tears streaming down his gaunt cheeks. "Yes, Mum. Next time," she said, stepping into the car. "Check the license plate before you judge the driver." The heavy door thudded shut. The tinted window rolled up, sealing Nia inside her world of silence and power. Preston stood on the curb, clutching the $100 to his chest, as the Maybach merged into the traffic of Fifth Avenue, its tail lights fading into the river of red lights. "Hey, Van der Hoven!" the valet captain shouted from the stand. "Quit daydreaming. There's a Prius waiting move." Preston van der Hoven wiped his eyes with his sleeve, stuffed the bill into his pocket, and ran to fetch the Prius. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the ultimate definition of karma. Preston van der Hoven spent 40 years thinking the world was his personal playground, only to end up parking cars for the very people he tried to crush. He learned the hardest lesson of all. The toes you step on today might be connected to the foot that kicks you out tomorrow. Nia didn't just defeat him, she dismantled him. But notice what she did at the end. She didn't scream, she didn't mock him. She gave him a tip and a lesson. That is the difference between money and class. Now I have to ask you guys a serious question. Do you think Nia's final act was mercy, or was it the ultimate insult? Was giving him that $100 bill a gesture of forgiveness? Or was it a reminder of how far he had fallen? I'm torn. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'll be pinning the best theory. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, please smash that. Like button it, tells the algorithm to share this justice with more people. And if you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on the bell notification. We drop new dramatic stories of revenge, karma, and justice served every single week, and you do not want to miss the next one. Remember, be humble, be kind, and watch who you disrespect. You never know who's really in charge. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.